Hello and welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have you join us today for Robert Half Real Talk, Hiring and Inspiring Resilient Teams. Whether you are leading a team, planning for the future, or navigating hiring challenges, this discussion will have something valuable for you to take away back to your teams. In today's complicated and uncertain employment landscape that's been caused by shifting macroeconomic events, organizations need to focus on hiring and retaining teams if they want to support their employees and be prepared for whatever the future holds. Over the next 45 minutes with our amazing panelists, you're going to learn a lot of things, including strategies to inspire and support your current employees to keep them engaged and ready for future challenges, how to balance hiring, training, and upskilling without overwhelming your team or disrupting day-to-day operations, and you'll discover how project professionals can help maintain productivity while supporting employee development. But before we can dive into all of that, let's start off with some quick introductions. I'm Lorraine K. Lee. I spent the first decade of my career as an editorial leader in tech, and now I'm a keynote speaker and best-selling author. Today, I am also your career and workplace expert and host for this virtual discussion. We are thrilled to bring you a powerhouse panel of industry leaders who will share their insights on creating future-ready teams. We have James Atkinson, the Vice President of Thought Leadership at SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management. James leads research teams in uncovering key insights on the challenges and trends affecting HR and the workplace. We have Brandy Britton, a tenured Executive Director of the Contract Finance and Accounting Practice Group at Robert Half. In her role, Brandy also serves as an authority on career and hiring trends. And last but certainly not least, we have Amber Stover with us, a visionary Chief People Officer from Post Investment Group. Amber oversees all of the human resources functions, including general processes and documentation, performance management, employee relations, recruitment, employee engagement, and compliance. Before we jump into the discussion, I would love to start with a fun question so the audience can get to know our amazing panelists a little bit better. So I'm going to ask all of you, could each of you please share with us, what was your first job? And Brandy, let's start with you.
Well, the first job where I contributed to Social Security, I was a retail clerk in a jewelry store in a very small town in Northern California.
Okay, amazing. What about you, Amber?
Yeah, similar to Brandy, I also started in retail when we're talking about the first time I paid legitimate taxes. I was a retail clerk at Spencer Gifts in my local mall, which, if anyone's familiar with their novelty items, was really cool and maybe a little risque for a 16-year-old. I don't know.
Amazing. And James?
Well, I'm going to keep with the same trend, also in retail, also at the mall, but I worked at Belk department stores.
Nice. Same here. Jeans store, retail, mall, very similar to all of you. Amazing. Thank you all for sharing. And now let's dive in. And the first thing I want to talk about is how the job market is sending really mixed signals. On one hand, we have low unemployment. Job openings are staying unfilled for long periods of time, and layoffs are continuing to make headlines. I was laid off in 2022, and I thought that was the worst of it, but they're still happening. So companies are caught in this paradox. Some are struggling to find skilled talent, while others are making difficult staffing decisions. And meanwhile, we previously saw a trend where employees remained in their roles for longer periods, which was also known as the Great Stay. And that has now shifted to the Great Freeze, where companies are slowing or pausing hiring amid cautious workforce planning. And what we're seeing is this economic uncertainty is keeping employees in their current roles. So I would love to hear from all of you, how would you define the current job market given these macroeconomic factors, and what key trends do you see are shaping both hiring and retention strategies right now? And so James, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I think the one word I would use to describe where we are right now is uncertainty. We see uncertainty in terms of economic and financial challenges. We see uncertainty in terms of technological advancements like AI and what that's going to have as an impact on the workforce. And so this is really capturing the background or the context within which everyone is currently operating. We conducted some research recently here at SHRM asking heads of HR, what were the big challenges you were anticipating as you head into 2025? And when they talked about those big kind of macroeconomic challenges, things like wage inflation, rising cost of goods and services, and that overall economic uncertainty rose to the top. So it's really they're in the background of trying to figure out what we're going to do next. That's in the minds of HR professionals today.
I would just add what we're seeing is that it's a very much a complex environment. We continue to hear from candidates that they're having a harder time finding a position. Maybe it's taking them a little bit longer. They're applying to a lot of roles and not necessarily hearing back. But yet we still hear from employers that they're having a hard time, particularly finding skilled talent or maybe very specific skill sets. And so from an optimistic standpoint, there are still definitely industries that are growing. There are other industries that are in flux or uncertain. But what we found is those who are if they're looking for employment to stick with it, because there still are opportunities out there.
And to piggyback on what Brandy was saying, I think that really what's confusing about it is that there are jobs, but maybe these jobs aren't appealing to the workforce because there's a bit of a disconnect between employers and employees. And I think one of the things that is top of mind right now is the debate between going back in office versus remote work. And so the younger generation is still seeking those jobs that allow them to have the flexibility of working from home. And more companies are asking people to come back to the office. And I think that this disconnect is creating kind of this gap where there's jobs available, but they're not the jobs that people want. And I think that's going to get bigger in the next, in recent times, we're going to see that gap get worse. And I think part of that is because we also are at a time where a large segment of our workforce is made up of an older generation of workers and the baby boomers, and they're retiring. So the people who were used to and accustomed to going to work every day are leaving the workforce. And then you combine that with the rising cost of education, which deters some of the younger generation, from going into certain professional services. And what you see is like jobs like accounting and finance and other professional level positions just getting harder and harder to fill. So unless we can figure out how to make those careers more attractive to the younger generation, I think we're going to see this getting wider. And I think that's on all of us to figure that out, or we're going to have a problem long term.
So you're all touching on a few different ideas here, but I'm hearing some common themes. We have some uncertainty, there's a disconnect. So given these themes, what does this ultimately mean for the organizations who know they want to hire and also keep up the productivity and morale of their current teams? Is it possible to do that? Amber, would love to start with you and get your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think it is, but I also think that we need to be realistic. And so I don't know how to answer this question without first acknowledging that we're living in a really unique and challenging political climate. Mm-hmm. When I was young and I was coming up in my career, people said, never talk about politics, religion, and certain other things at work, and you're just fine. These things are irrelevant. Look, that's not the reality, is it? And I think as we're trying to connect with and attract the current generation of talent, one of the things they want to know more than ever is, what do you as an employer stand for? They want to work for a company that aligns with their values. So I think for me and the companies that I work for, what that means is making sure that we're transparent in all of our recruiting and hiring efforts about what our company is actually standing for. That means highlighting that we have a commitment to still providing a respectful workplace, a tolerant workplace. We still very much, hold DEI initiatives to be true to our heart fundamentally, and also want to make sure that we're, providing that type of a culture where people feel respected. And I think it's also, lastly, letting them know that we have some platform where we give back, whether it's giving to our employees or giving to the community that we are, present in. And I think all of that is, away from the traditional ways in which you might attract talent. I think those are more important today than ever.
you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I think adding on to what Emmer said, it's really important for organizations to think about what is the value that you are going to be provided to someone who you are wanting to come work for you or someone who is already there, and being very clear about kind of who you are as an organization, but also what you provide in terms of that overall value proposition. I think one of the challenges is that organizations sometimes try to be everything to everyone, and that's not gonna fly. It's not going to bring in the right people into your organization. It's also not gonna allow you to keep people there. If people are not a good cultural fit, for example, to your organization, you don't necessarily want them there because it's not going to work out well in the end. It's going to be a challenge for everyone around. So I think really being clear about, as Amber said, what you stand for, but also what you provide. What is the value that you provide? That's going to allow you to match better to the right candidate. It's going to allow you to ensure you keep the employees at your organization engaged, so that they will stay there for a long time and grow in their careers.
A lot of sense, and employees these days are more mission driven. So to be very explicit up front just makes it easier for all parties involved.
Yeah,
Brandy, do you have anything? Yeah.
I think, just tying in what James and Amber had to say, every day there's something different on the news, whether you're looking at social media, you're watching TV, whatever your media platform is. And so from a leadership standpoint, what we see people want is steady leadership. So to Amber's point, whatever you stand for, stick with it. Don't change it in a month, don't change it in 2 months, 6 months, so on. Because and maybe people don't necessarily agree with it, but at least they can expect something consistent. And then I think the other thing is from a communication standpoint. I think back to about a year ago or 5 years ago, around this time, we were in the beginning of COVID, and we'd all changed our work habits. And it was almost a fearful time. And, for me as an employee, what I appreciated about my leadership was the communication that was so consistent. And all right, here's the plan, and here's what we're going to do next. Then we had another call a week later. And so just that steady, consistent leadership and communication, I think, can really help companies as well as leaders successfully retain and attract future employees for them.
Yeah, I think that communication piece is so key. Even if it's bad news or unpleasant news, like as long as leadership is being transparent, being clear, being frequent, I think an employee would much rather appreciate that than never hearing the news at all. So completely in line with you there. And you're touching on another point here. Like I mentioned, I got laid off previously, and so that's a form of bad news you want to sort of get transparency on. So with all the layoffs happening, there is a lot of talent out there now in the market. So how can organizations stand out and really connect with skilled professionals in this competitive landscape? So Brandy, would love to throw it over to you first.
Yeah. So, I think certainly large companies have an advantage because they've got the big name. So when they're hiring, people know who they are. There's a lot of information about them online. And where I think small and medium-sized businesses are the ones who need the most help. And, a couple of pieces of advice there. One would be employers have to remember that they've got to sell themselves. Why is this opportunity good? Why is this role going to expand somebody's skill set? And then why that company is a great place to work? Because a lot of times we see employers really, and you should, right? You need to interview the person to make sure they're a fit for you, but realize that the reverse is happening, and that employee is interviewing you to see if they're a place that they want to work. And I think to Amber's earlier point, there's that disconnect of what do employees want and what do employers offer. Okay, knowing that it could be very, very different, how do we get those things closer to the middle and asking more questions and selling that opportunity on the front end?
Your point too, like when you go to the smaller companies and medium-sized companies as an employee, like there's a lot more opportunity, a lot more responsibility and opportunity to grow. So I experienced that myself as well when I moved from a very large company, LinkedIn, to a more medium-sized startup.
Yeah.
James, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I was just going to jump in here. Brandy was talking about the idea of selling yourself to the broader market. I think one of the key pieces of advice that we give is make sure that you are keeping the broader market as broad as possible. And that means ensuring that you're not kind of unnecessarily restricting uh, pockets of the labor market because of requirements or restrictions that you're putting in place, oftentimes in your job descriptions. So we do a lot of research here on what we call untapped talent. And these are different pools of talent that often have a large number of skills that will be very important for any given job that you're looking to fill. But sometimes we unnecessarily restrict them out of our pool of potential great employees because we say you have to have X number of years of experience or you have to have a very specific educational credential or educational degree. And so that idea around ensuring that you are kind of broadening up the market, you want to sell yourself, but you also want to make sure that you have a large number of employees who could potentially come and work for you and that you're not restricting that on your own.
I love that. Skills first. I think that's the way of the future.
Absolutely.
Amber, what about you?
Yeah, I would add, and I think it's a little bit of what Brandy and James both said. The people that you are looking to bring on board want to know if they choose your company over all of the competitors, that they're going to have a career path in front of them, not just that single job. So you have to be prepared to outline for them your commitment to their development, how they're going to be able to move upwards, develop new skills. And also, I think to what James is saying, though, also be willing to teach them new skills. When you have somebody who has the ambition and the potential, then they can do those things if you're willing to just teach them. And I think that's, how you gain loyalty is by letting someone feel like it is a career, not just that one job.
And Lorraine, I would just
Go ahead,
I was just going to add to what Amber was saying. She mentioned that career advancement. Again, pay and benefits are often top of mind for most workers, but some of our research certainly supports the idea that career advancement is almost neck and neck with what workers want in terms of a great job and a great fit at an organization. So I just wanted to kind of add that as well, that's just so important.
I have friends who have really high paying jobs, they have great titles, but if your career starts stalling out, they're just not motivated and they're not excited to be there. One thing I've been reading a lot about is the growing number of interim and project work. And so hiring contract talent can be a really wonderful way for companies to stay nimble and also support their teams, especially during times of uncertainty, because there's always more work than it feels like we have time for, right? So how can organizations best integrate contract professionals into their workforce? And what would you say are some of the benefits of doing so in today's current environment? James, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned the key point is that in times of uncertainty, the flexibility that contract or temporary workers provide you is invaluable. It allows you to kind of grow and shrink your workforce in ways that do a couple of things. One, it doesn't have that same kind of negative impact on employee morale when you have to end a contract with someone as it would if you had to undergo layoffs, right? So if you're in a shrinking environment, your revenues are shrinking, the markets are challenging, it allows you to adjust the number of people that are working without having that same kind of negative impact. But on the flip side, because it's uncertain, maybe you have a spike in work and you can add on new workers. oftentimes these workers get really ingrained into the work. And if you get to a point where you can start hiring again, that's a fantastic source of talent, is people who have already proven themselves in the job with the skills that you want to accomplish for that particular job. So the amount of flexibility that this type of work allows you, especially in times of uncertainty, is really great.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, everything James said is true, but and I want to promise that the people out there listening, I'm not just saying this because Brandy's on the call. But I personally on my team have worked closely with Brandy's team because there's a couple key factors that make, I think, temporary workers so impactful and necessary as part of our workforce today. One is if you do have an open position that is harder to fill, it allows you to get the work done without it all falling on your permanent team members while you're looking to make that permanent hire. But I think more importantly, certain jobs have seasonality aspects to it. Accounting and finance get killed during tax season, but those aren't year-long permanent needs. So having the flexibility of bringing in qualified, talented people in that professional services environment to come get you through that peak season is, I think, a necessity because you don't need to hire that person all year. So I think that that's just anyone who's not taking advantage of that is probably doing themselves a disservice.
We appreciate the plug, Amber, and we promise we didn't pay her for that. No, certainly what we see, having been at Robert Half for over 26 years, and the majority of that on the contract side, we certainly see companies taking advantage of talent on demand. And to James's point, in an uncertain market, you don't want to commit necessarily to a full-time hire, but it doesn't mean you don't have work. Or to Amber's point, you might have a resignation. You don't want to put that on your already lean team. So leveraging contract talent to help you through those periods of time can really help organizations. And we've seen companies do a really good job on an annual basis looking at what percentage of their staff that they want to be variable or contract talent because of, to Amber's point, those cyclical type of projects or needs that come up. Then on the reverse, we definitely are seeing a lot more candidates, particularly recent college graduates who find contract work really appealing. Because I think about when I graduated, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. And with contract work, you have the ability to try out different things, try out different industries, because you really don't know what that job is all about till you do it for a couple of months. And this certainly allows that. And then it strengthens their skill sets where maybe they have new industries, new softwares, things like that, that can propel them later on in their careers.
I love that point that you made about the early career professionals, because that should be a time in your life where you're trying to learn and soak in as much as you can. So I know personally for me, I was always liking to have a bunch of different projects, even at my full-time role. So yeah, that resonates with me 100%. And thank you all for your responses. And I want to switch gears a little bit. One of the themes I'm seeing a lot when I talk to my corporate clients is around adaptability. I know we've touched on it in our discussion already today, but I'm curious to hear from all of you. What strategies have you found effective in inspiring teams to innovate and grow during uncertainty and change? And so, Brandy, I'll throw it over to you to start us off.
Yeah. So, during uncertainty and change often means also lean, and maybe not as many colleagues or team members as you'd like. And so certainly we've seen that there's been an opportunity to be more efficient and streamline processes that are in place. Because what's that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention. Well, when you got a list, this big, you're going to find creative ways to maybe organize that and improve the processes that are in place so that list gets a little bit smaller and more manageable.
Yeah.
And I'll jump in here to say I think what Brandy was saying around it's a time to not just be efficient, but also to think about innovative new ideas as well. And the the period of uncertainty that you're in, it might be a downturn in the economy. It might just be a downturn in your particular sector that you are in. But at some point, these things are cyclical, right? And you're going to go into that more booming section. And you read stories over and over of organizations who innovate through the hard times and are prepared and ready to go strong when things turn back around. And so even though, we're not necessarily in a recession or anything at that point, we should still be thinking about, okay, if I do have to work with the leader team right now, I should still be carving out some period of time to think about what's next. What is the next thing? What's the next idea? What's the next innovation? Because I don't want to wait until the market is all of a sudden really great to start that ideation process. You're going to be behind. You're going to be behind your competitors, and not everybody can take advantage of those upswings whenever they do occur.
Yeah, and I would just chime in and say, look, this is not meant to minimize the impact and the stress that comes with times of uncertainty and nimble workforces. But I also think I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the opportunities that come with these times for the workers. Because when you are running a company with a more lean or nimble workforce, we talked earlier about the importance that team members have when it comes to their career growth and opportunities for that. And I don't know a better time for teams to get an opportunity to grow and learn skills they may not have otherwise been able to do. They get opportunities to take on projects, do work, things that may not have ever even been thought about in their original scope of work. And, that is the best time to learn maybe that you like doing something completely different or move up even quicker because you've been challenged at that level. So I do think it's important to note that, challenges always bring opportunity. And if you rise to those occasions, you're going to come out probably much further ahead in your career.
What happens in the discomfort, right?
Exactly.
And yeah. Agree with that 100%. So this next question is one that's near and dear to my heart, and that is making sure that high potential employees are seen and recognized. And so I'd love to hear from all of you, how can organizations first identify those high potential employees who might be ready for more responsibility or leadership roles? And then how do we upskill these team members and make sure that they are actually set up for success once we try to move them to that next level? Amber, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I love this question. Obviously, given what I do for a living, it's near and dear to my heart, but also because, to be very transparent, one of the biggest gaps in most companies is leadership skills, quite honestly. There's the saying that people will always rise to the level of their incompetency, but that doesn't have to be the case, because the real problem is that most professionals rise up through the ranks based on technical skills only. And then they get put in these positions to manage large teams, and they've never been taught the leadership skills that they need to be successful in that new set of challenges. So what we should be doing is looking at our employees at all levels of the organization and seeing those people who you can already see become natural mentors, coaches, go-tos on the teams, identifying them early and having leadership programs built in where you're teaching them those skills to be strong managers, strong leaders, adaptability, flexibility, how to be comfortable with discomfort. But you have to start early, because once you put them in that position, you're setting them up for failure if you didn't give them those tools.
Right. Yeah. I've never been someone to complain about, I've always loved having more training, more ways to learn. So I completely agree with that. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to echo what Amber was saying in a lot of different areas. And I think that some of our research shows that in 2025, heads of HR are prioritizing leadership and manager development more than anything else. It is their number one priority. And, we think about that as existing managers and leaders, but should also be thinking about what are the leadership skills that we are starting to develop in those next level managers and leaders as well. and the types of skills I think Amber mentioned, that adaptability that really rose to the top from our research. We've talked a lot about uncertainty but the ability to manage change at your organization is crucial. And so whether that is someone who's already in a manager or leadership role, or whether that's someone you maybe have identified as high potential, during periods of uncertainty is when you start to see like who can manage that change, who can be a change agent, even if they don't have formal authority, who can show that they understand how to bring other people along in these periods. And so I think it's exceptionally important, and it's a great opportunity to help develop those types of skills in our current environment.
You made that you don't need to have the official title to be able to bring people along to be that change maker.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really love the point that Amber brought up around developing them at every level. Certainly, as recruiters, we often hear two main reasons for why people want to leave their position. One is lack of career growth, which we already talked about. And the second is their leader, their manager. They want to leave. They don't necessarily want to leave the company. And so a company's ability to develop their leaders is critical for their ability to retain their staff. And to identify future leaders, a couple things is, one, how inquisitive are they? And do they want to be a leader? Because sometimes people don't necessarily want to be one, but they just happen to be next up. Yeah. And then but once they're there, or before they get there, for those who express their interest, how are we teaching and coaching them? And sometimes it comes in the form of reverse reviews. So leadership being strong enough personally to say, what can I do better for you? How can I help you? Is there anything I can change? And then for senior leaders, I think of myself, the best coaching I ever got was one from my employees who said, gave me some direct feedback on how I was communicating with them, and it came down to communication. But then also leaders who were confident enough to tell me the stuff that I didn't necessarily want to hear but needed to hear. And so I think it goes both ways. And then for employees who want to be leaders, just being receptive to that feedback and knowing that it's not an overnight thing. It takes time to develop those skills.
Feedback, so important. How did you create an environment where people did feel comfortable sharing feedback with you and vice versa? Was there anything in particular that you found helpful to sort of facilitate that?
Yeah, well, initially it started painfully because I had a lot of turnover on my team, and I knew I needed to do something different. Mm-hmm. So then as time progressed, I didn't want any more turnover. So I had to ask the individuals, like, what can I do better for you? And I learned that, that I'm not the manager, right? They're my customers as employees, and how am I going to keep them satisfied? And it became a much stronger mutual relationship, but it's always an ongoing opportunity.
That's not easy feedback. So, I mean, continuing on that point, you were talking about turnover. Strong leadership pipelines are critical for long-term success. And one of you, I think Amber touched on this earlier, with baby boomers retiring at a rapid pace, and we have other leaders who are transitioning out of the workforce. How can companies make succession planning a priority, and what happens when they don't? And so, Amber, I'll throw it over to you first.
Yeah, I think first is being willing to invest in your current team members. It goes a little bit along with what James was saying earlier, and I think I hit on too, which is if we have programs in place where we're willing to invest in our team to help them get additional education, certifications, whatever it takes, why not do it? If we know education and cost of these things is a deterrent for somebody to go into a field that you desperately need, then let's help boost that pipeline, because you already know you have a team member who meets your cultural attributes and who fits in and wants to grow. So I think it's having an educational program, reimbursement program of some sort that will allow them to do those things and grow.
Yeah, Lorraine, I would just add, succession planning. We hear from a lot of employers that that's something that they're currently working on, something that they want help. And, at not every level per se, but at definitely middle management and above, is something that a lot of organizations, if they haven't started planning for, need to do right away.
And I would just add that, really every manager at the company, at whatever level, should be developing a successor. And, a lot of orgs have some kind of succession management process in place. But I think it's really important to ensure that is a key part of a job description for any single manager. I got some advice early on in my career that, I should be managing myself out of my job.
Yeah.
That is the key thing. That is one of my key responsibilities, is that I need to build up my team in such a way that I can step away and they are fully capable of leading. And so I think that being very clear that that is the responsibility of every single people leader at your organization, that is very key.
Idea of making that so explicit, because I 100% agree with you. Like, if you move up, then your team gets to move up. It's a win-win for everyone, but you have to be really intentional about it and not micromanage and not worry about, what's going to happen if you do change roles. Everyone sort of lifts up together. Thank you for sharing that. And oh my gosh, believe it or not, we are coming close to the end of our time, and there have been so many amazing nuggets shared. But we do have a little bit time left, so I'm not going to say goodbye quite yet. I actually wanted to do a quick lightning round with all of you. So in typical lightning round format, we're going to keep our responses short and sweet. So is everyone ready? I'm going to fire away. All right.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we're gonna go in the order of Amber, Brandy, and James, and we'll just go around for a few of these questions. So the first one, what's one word, Amber, you're gonna start off. What's one word to describe a great leader?
Empathetic.
Brandy?
I got 2 words. Sorry.
Okay.
Be real.
Nice. Okay. And James, what about you?
I would go with focused.
Okay. All of those. Amazing. Love it. All right. Second rapid fire question. What is a go-to low-cost way to recognize a team member's hard work?
Shout outs are free.
Yes. Love a good shout out.
I was going to say the same thing. Acknowledgement is free.
James?
Yep. I was just going to say even a low-cost gift card goes a long way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, acknowledge the team member. One thing I used to like to do is also loop in their manager, and then you get even more presence and influence that way, and everyone's happy. All right. Last rapid fire question. What is the last book or podcast that inspired your leadership style? Amber.
Bullish on Uncertainty is a book I read years ago because an owner of a prior company made me, and I found it to be really great because it explores 2 very different tactics in developing culture. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's Wall Street in the 80s and 90s. I actually loved that book.
Okay, amazing. Brandy.
I like it. I jotted that one down. So I would say a podcast that I listen to routinely, which is the All In podcast. And how it influences my leadership style is more about being a student at all times and just consistently learning.
And James, close us off.
Yeah, I actually read a book recently called Our Iceberg is Melting, and it's a fun allegory about a group of penguins whose iceberg is literally melting, but it is couched in the principles of change management. And I think that I just enjoyed thinking about being very process oriented in terms of how you manage that change and not just reacting to it, but walking through that broader process in the same way the penguins did. So
nice. Okay. Sounds like a creative take on that concept. Amazing. Yes. Well, what a fantastic discussion. A huge, huge thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing their expertise and insights with us, and to all of you in the audience for taking time out of your day to join us and engage in the conversation. The fact that you are here today shows that you care about the future of your organization and teams, and I cannot wait to see how you take the learnings from today and implement them moving forward. As we look ahead, building and supporting strong, future ready teams will be more important than ever. If you found today's discussion valuable, be sure to follow Robert Half for more insights and resources. And this is recorded, so you can also share the link out to your colleagues after the event today. Thank you so, so much again, everyone, for being here, and we will see you next time.